Hello, I'm very happy to tell you more about myths and reality on hearing loss and hearing care. Now, to look at this, we used the new Copilot, the AI-powered productivity tool developed by Microsoft, because we hope it will reflect the common view of the public. So when you ask Copilot, what are the myths about hearing loss? Then you get the answer, certainly. Let's debunk some common myths about hearing loss. One of them is hearing loss is just a part of getting older, so it can't be that important, or it's normal for people's age. Secondly, my hearing is fine. It's just that everybody's mumbling, so it's the others which are the problem, not me. And then I'll wait to get my hearing tested until I really notice the problem. But the issue is with hearing loss, it slowly declines, so you don't really experience it. And that is why a lot of people wait too long. So remember that hearing health is an essential part of our overall health, and addressing hearing loss proactively can lead to better quality of life. So far, Copilot. Now, if you look at the theme for World Hearing Day today, we're looking at myths and realities. So one of the myths we are hearing is that hearing loss is seen as a disability which is not important to manage. Is this so or not? The stigma related to hearing loss is high and it's increasing. Hearing aid users are not respected and perceived as unintelligent. That's another myth. Hearing loss is an invisible disability and audiologists are invisible, unknown professionals. Is that so or not? So we'll dig into that. So hearing loss is seen as a disability which is not important to manage. If you look at the research, we look at a study conducted by Carleton, and then you see that on a survey of 1,200 adults between the age of 50 and 80 years, they asked what is the most important health condition to manage. And there you see that hearing loss ranks very low, just before asthma and just after arthritis. So this looks like an issue for the general group at that moment. It's a fairly large group when you look into this. If you ask the same question to people who perceive to have normal hearing and who are not using hearing aids, the ranking is even lower. It's only 1% that states that hearing loss is important to manage. So it's kind of unclear. If you don't experience a problem, you don't see it as an issue. And then if you ask this to the group who does perceive a hearing loss and are using hearing aids, then you see that the ranking increases. They see that hearing loss is much more important to manage. And that's of course clear because those people know exactly what it is. And they know also what managing hearing loss can do. So far the public view, what we are looking at. But what about health providers? And here we asked first-line health providers, so primary healthcare. And then you see, as people that experience normal hearing, they also rank the management of hearing loss very, very low. Also the lowest condition after asthma, after vision loss, after many other aspects. So I think you see that there's something to work on, right? So you see it's very low as a fairly low importance to manage. Now to handle that, we set up a campaign in Belgium. It's the National Health Institute that has been doing this, the health insurance system. And they say that hearing loss is never normal. That's a huge campaign towards general practitioners. They say this because many GPs state that if people come and they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and people say, I have a problem with my hearing, say, well, how old are you? And if you say more than 60, they typically say it's normal for your age. It's never normal. So they need to detect, discuss, and refer when there's an issue. We also pointed out in that campaign what is found in the World Report on Hearing on what are the consequences of untreated hearing loss, and it's a lot, right? Of course, you have communication issues, but that has impact on health. You have social isolation, more people with loneliness. You have an issue with employment and you get burnout. There's a higher prevalence of depression, lower quality of life, lower psychosocial and cognitive health, and the risk of dementia, which is provided. So I think it's very important to handle hearing loss, to treat it correctly, and to be sure that you prevent all these consequences. So that's point one. So unfortunately, it is correct that hearing loss by the general public and by primary healthcare professionals is not seen as something which has a high priority to manage, which is a shame. Now, what about the stigma related to hearing loss? Is it high and is it increasing? If you ask Copilot, typically they say that the stigma surrounding hearing loss remains a significant challenge. Stigma leads to delayed treatment, which is unfortunate because people want to hide it, so they will delay the treatment. There are social and cultural associations related to this, which is an issue. And there's a lot of misunderstandings and stereotypes. So people with hearing loss being considered of being old, cognitively diminished, and being poor communication partners. That is why we need to do something about it. We need to raise awareness, we need to promote education, we need to normalize hearing aid use, and we need to combat stigma. So Copilot states that, remember, hearing loss is not just an inconvenience. It impacts overall well-being. Let's work together to reduce stigma and create a more inclusive environment for everyone affected by hearing impairment. So far, Copilot is doing a very good job, and I think it's very good requests. So let's look at the research. There's many publications on this topic, so I will just highlight one of them. Looking at what is the stigma related to hearing loss and is it increasing? It's the stigma of diseases, unequal burden, uneven decline by Best et al. The first aspect of stigma is what they call judgment by the general public. So they think that people are believed to be responsible for their condition. And if you look at the trend over the years, because they already start in the 80s up till now, then you see that typically behavioral disabilities like non-normative behaviors, addictions, eating disorders, and other mental illnesses, they are rated quite high on judgment. This is followed by infectious health conditions like sexually transmitted infections, other infectious diseases, hepatitis, influenza. This rates lower on judgment, so people are less blamed to have this condition and to be on their own. Interestingly, chronic, like cancer, autoimmune, genetic, but also visual and auditory impairment, ranks very low on this condition. You see that the judgment is fairly low, so people say that they don't blame people with hearing loss for having this issue. And you also see a decline over the years. So where do we position hearing loss? And then if you look at this, so we have the overall scores, and you see that in fact hearing loss scores very low. Going into the upper level for behavioral issues, you see that hearing loss is only positioned here. Another aspect of stigma is disgust. And that is more linked to the public linking this to the contagion. So they want to avoid the mechanisms and they want to stay away from it. And not surprisingly, what ranks then very high is infectious. It's kind of logical because if it's infectious, the risk that it will be contagious is of course higher. Behavior ranks lower, and also here chronic, including hearing loss, also is much lower than the others, but you see there's also an interesting decline over the years. So where is hearing loss on this position? As you will see, hearing loss is really at the bottom. So people are not disgusted because people have a hearing loss. That reflex isn't happening at all. So that looks good. So we see that judgment and disgust is declining. And we also see that hearing loss typically ranks middle low or very low depending on the aspect of stigma. So seems to be there's no problem if you look at the overall field of stigma from different diseases. So that looks like this is not correct, right? That stigma is high and it's increasing. But the issue is there's a lot of self-stigma for hard of hearing people. So let's dig into that. That's another study, a publication by Dana David that was published fairly recently. And there you see that they talk about multiple aspects of self-stigma and also stereotypes which are existing. So the typical stereotypes are that people with hearing loss are old, stupid, and crippled. And that's what you see here, right? The typical stereotypes on the cognitive attributes. The emotional aspects is that it's followed by shame, and people pity people with hearing loss. That's the myth and the stereotype. And the consequences are that people with hearing loss will conceal that they have a hearing problem or will withdraw from the society, leading to social isolation. And that's what they found in this study, based on an in-depth interview from older people with age-related hearing loss. You see all these aspects coming back here. Unfortunately, when you look at what is the impact of hearing care and hearing devices, they seem to think that hearing devices even makes this worse. So yeah, unfortunately, that is confirmed that the self-stigma of hard of hearing people is high. And that's a shame, and that's something to work on. Now, are hearing aid users not respected and perceived as unintelligent, as they seem to think? Let's ask to a pilot. Well, they say that hearing aid users should be treated with respect and empathy, just like anyone else. Unfortunately, there are instances where people may hold misconceptions or stereotypes about individuals who use hearing aids. So that's unfair and inaccurate. So points to consider is there's a diversity of abilities. Many people with using hearing aids have huge, great abilities. People with hearing loss and hearing aids have challenges and they need to adapt. So you see that they're doing a lot of effort, and that needs intelligence and good way of working. And we also need to work on awareness and education, both about hearing loss and assistive devices, to break down those stereotypes. Advocacy is important, and the best placed are hearing aid users and organizations really play a crucial role in challenging these stereotypes. So let's celebrate the uniqueness of each individual. Let's recognize their values beyond the typical characteristics or the assistive devices they may use. They are worthwhile and they should live the life to the full. What about studies? And typical studies are typically called the hearing aid effect, right? What do people think about people with hearing loss? So here you have 24 adults, and they judge pictures of a young man. Typical young man there's typically more pictures, one wearing hearing aids, and then they look at, but they are using different types of technology. They will evaluate the different types and will show them the pictures and what is in there. And they will look into attractiveness, if they're old or young, successful yes or no, hardworking or lazy, trustworthy or not, intelligent or not, friendly or not, and educated or not. That's what they will look into. So what are the pictures and what did they depict? Well, the first pictures was somebody with a BTE hearing aid behind the ear, a traditional type of hearing aid, right? But more recent style. The second one was a thin tube, an open fit hearing aid where you don't really see the ear mold anymore, and it's a fairly slim device behind the ear. The third one using a deep canal hearing aid, the CIC, completely in the canal, which is close to invisible. Only in the canal you can see something, which is also a popular style. They also looked at the traditional earbuds at that time. It's 2030, so there were still earbuds with a wire, typically used for an MP3 device. And they looked also at the Bluetooth headsets of those days. Remember, they were slightly bigger in those days, and that's what they evaluated. So what do they see? Well, if they look at the significant differences, they found a significant difference that the person using this earbud, right, listening to the MP3 player, was seen as the youngest. Interestingly, the person using the pictures of those people using a standard behind the ear hearing aid were seen as the most trustworthy. And if we just look at what is the highest ranking, so that is not a significant difference, but at least they rank higher and it's an indication. There you will see that, in fact, there are some interesting differences, and the hearing aid user, right, the typical BTE, was judged as highly intelligent, was judged as highly educated, and was judged as friendly. And that's also what we see in the conclusions. So for the significant differences, we see that the BTE wearer was seen as the most trustworthy. For the highest scores, you see that the open BTE wearer was seen as the most successful. The BTE wearer was seen as the most intelligent. The BTE compared to the Bluetooth user was seen as the most friendly. And the BTE wearer was seen as the most educated. So you see that it's kind of interesting that all these are in place, and typically the remarks and the feelings about the pictures of people with a hearing aid were much more positive than what you typically see in the people's view and all these aspects. Another study conducted later, which is looking at how children look at other children. So it's typically 45 typically developed children with normal hearing. They were aged between 6 and 11 years. They were recruited, and they asked also questions about children with and without a hearing aid. What they evaluated was, is there a difference in cognitive competence, physical competence, and peer acceptance? Also here you see on cognitive competence, they don't see a difference. So they don't see that the person using a hearing aid should be less or more intelligent. So that's the same. Unfortunately, they look at physical competence, and peer acceptance was lower for the pictures of boys, of children using hearing aids. So that is something to be aware of, but on intelligence, there was no difference. And then the most recent study was conducted in this year, only published this year. And you see also 60 participants, and they rate younger and older adults with different pictures. They were photoshopped, by the way. They looked at, are they seen older and younger? Are they seen more or less intelligent? And are they seen more or less attractive? And it's interesting to see there is no difference. So here you see pictures of young people using hearing aids, yes or no, rated by young people. That's what you see here. Pictures of older people wearing hearing aids, yes or no, rated by young people. Pictures of young people rated by older people. Pictures of older people rated by older people. And you see, in fact, that there are no real differences. The only effect we have seen is that for the persons with hearing aids, typically they responded more faster if aspects were negative, but in the rating as such, there was no difference. So here we can conclude that are hearing aid users not respected and perceived as unintelligent? That is not true. It's a myth that is maybe floating around, but if you ask a general public, if you ask younger people, older people, you don't see that. For the young children, for children, there's an issue with acceptance. Minor issue, but that is what we need to look into. And then the last point. What about hearing loss is an invisible disability and audiologists are invisible, unknown professionals? Well, let's ask Copilot, but let's maybe look at how Copilot sees it, right? So what we do now, we ask Copilot to give us a picture of a man using a hearing aid, and you see it's a huge hearing aid. So I wouldn't call that a very discrete solution. So that's the impression of Copilot. We asked, give a picture of a baby using a hearing aid, and then you see this, which is not a real hearing aid if you ask me. Picture of a baby using a cochlear implant. That doesn't really look like a cochlear implant, and it's highly visible. And give me a picture of a cochlear implant, and that is something very weird. So Copilot did quite well when it came to estimations. What is the public view? What would you consider? If it's about creating images, I think that Copilot sees hearing aids too much as bulky devices. Maybe that's also how they are seen by the general public. Now, if you look at communication, is hearing loss seen as an invisible disability? Yes, it is. And it definitely is an invisible disability. And there are multiple invisible disabilities. And this has consequences because if a disability is invisible, it's not really seen, it's not really observed, and people don't take it into account. And that has multiple negative consequences. On top of that, do users prefer invisible solutions? Yes, they do. And that's why you see so much promotion activities, publicity campaigns on the best invisible hearing aids, the benefits of invisible hearing aids, pictures of invisible hearing aids. It looks like a hearing aid is something to hide. And that is why the solutions go invisible, right? Second point is the question then also that audiology is an unknown and invisible profession? And this is what you also see. Audiology, though essential, often remains unseen and unrecognized by the wider public. Audiologists work diligently behind the scenes, right? But that is not what you see. They ensure people can communicate, they can connect and enjoy the fullest of life. Their expertise is more than just fitting hearing aids. They evaluate hearing loss, they diagnose disorders, they provide personalized solutions, they do lots of stuff in different parts of the world. Unfortunately, their impact is often unnoticed because the work is subtle and also because the users don't want it to be visible. Hearing loss affects millions worldwide and it's often invisible. So people adapt, compensate and cope silently, invisibly. So audiologists navigate this what we call hidden landscape. They help individuals regain lost sounds, reconnect with loved ones, and find joy in everyday conversations. Isn't that a job you'd love to do if you see what audiologists are doing? So let's celebrate what I call the invisible warriors, the audiologists, who weave the fabric of our audible world. So let's maybe look into this and let's be more positive. This is also what we see. I think this is just what we saw this weekend. It's a ranking of job ad. It's an official instance looking at unemployment and trying to get people a job. Here you see the Flemish version. We have translated it in English for your convenience. So the ranking of scarcest professions in Flanders. And you see that head nurse is the most scarce, followed by audiologists and hearing care professionals, and then followed by other professions. So yes, we see it's an issue. And that is why we need to promote audiology. We need to create more awareness. Here you see a campaign launched by the Professional Association, the educational settings in audiology, because we want audiology to be more known. We have asked our students to create TikTok videos and to do much more to be sure that people know what audiology is. It's so important and we really need to promote it because the number of people using hearing aids is increasing. Awareness is improving. You can see that in the Getting the Numbers Right report we are launching also this week. So to conclude, is hearing loss seen as a disability which is not important to manage? Unfortunately, that's true. The stigma related to hearing loss is not high and it's not increasing. So that's what you see from the research. So this is a myth. Unfortunately, the self-stigma of hard of hearing people is high, and that is something to worry about. Hearing aid users are not respected and perceived as unintelligent. That is false, not correct. And hearing loss is an invisible disability, and audiologists are invisible, unknown professionals. Unfortunately, that is true, and that is something to work on. Thank you for your attention, and please enjoy World Hearing Day. And now I want to give the floor to the next speaker. The handout will be available, and we also will make sure that all the references can be found of what we said. Thank you.